Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome to Sticks and Wires. Today's vlog or rant is the grid is not always right. I spent many hours, many years, many nights not sleeping, trying to get my playing perfectly to land on a grid. And I thought it was something that I had to achieve, especially being in the studio a lot. Until I kind of came to the realization that most of recorded music history has nothing to do with playing on a grid. And some of the most grooving tracks and some of the most influential, greatest drummers in history don't, can't nail a grid. And that was never a standard for anything. Playing with a click track, yes, but it's different than playing on the grid. There's a misconception that if you're not playing on the grid, it's wrong. Your playing is wrong. But does it feel better when it's on a grid? I would kind of beg to differ. I would much rather hear a really great drummer put down a track and not be beat detectived, so it's perfect, and hear his natural feel. Part of this is, when your heart beats, does it beat perfectly in time? No, it slows down and it speeds up according to your emotion, right? And even if you're very relaxed all the time, it's going to move a little bit. Part of your personality and the soul of your playing is the kind of lope in your playing. And I'm not referring to swing as in lope. I'm talking about the space between your bass drum and kick drum, between beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, assuming we're in 4/4, right? Like part of where you put that backbeat versus where you landed 1 and 3 with your kick drum, that's your feel. Okay, I had a really great compliment one time because somebody said I can make the beat feel really wide and elastic, except it doesn't, I have good time, I have good consistent overall time, so we stay at the same tempo over the course of a song. So there's a difference between playing on a grid and having great time. Totally different. There's also a difference between playing on a grid and playing well with a click track. There's feeling between the grid, and it doesn't mean you're wrong if you're not exactly on a grid. Consistency is important because the consistency of your groove is that's what gets people's heads bobbing and butts moving, when they're listening to you. So if your time is just all over the place and your sound is not consistent and things are speeding up and slowing down like ridiculously, of course, this is not what I'm saying. So consistency is great. You want to practice for great time. You want to practice for a consistency between where your kick drum and your snare land. In a ride pattern, you want to practice for consistency of time, consistency of feel. It doesn't have to be a grid-like feel. And part of what I'm saying is sometimes the difference between where the kick and the snare land or the ride cymbal pattern lands creates tension in the music. A little bit of rushing, a little bit of dragging, a little coming back to center. That creates tension. And in my opinion, tension in music is good. That's what creates excitement and then releases excitement. A verse to a chorus. The chorus is exciting. That's the part you want to hear. Let's get to the chorus, right? Or if you're listening to some great jazz, when it gets super, super intense, that is tension. Sometimes the simplicity can be tension. Stuart Copeland would not have existed if he was put on a grid. The brilliance of his playing is his kind of reckless abandon, is his creativity, and part of it is the rushing and the excitement and the drive that were, in those Police songs and in those songs and how they were pushing. That's some of the brilliance. And if you had gridded that stuff or beat detectived it back in the day, it would have been like a third as cool and exciting, right? Same with any Bonham track or Rolling Stones track. I could go on and on. So of course when we play with sequences or loops, we need to be as close as we can. This is something you need to practice for, especially in this era of music that we're in. You're required to play with certain things. You need to make it feel good in there. But you shouldn't be killing yourself if you're milliseconds back or ahead, unless there's like awful flamming happening and it's consistent. There's not many people that play perfectly on a grid. I would venture to say there's only a few in the world that are that good. And I always also venture to say that that doesn't necessarily make it better feeling, in my opinion. So I want to give you a little example of a track that I played on that I feel like feels pretty good. We'll just look at the drums here. Let me play a little, and then we'll zoom in on some of the grid and check it out. Okay, I like it. Sounds pretty groovy to me. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I would bob my head to this if I didn't know it was me, I guess. Okay, so kick. Let's find it. Kick right here. Let's zoom in. Where are we at? All right, that one's pretty good. Right on. Let's go to the next one. Okay, right here. Okay, slightly more ahead. Still pretty close, but there. Okay, third one. Again, a little more ahead than the first one. It's minimal, right? There's one. Okay, even more ahead. Not perfectly on the grid, right? We can see that right here. I'm just going to move down here. All right, here's one. All right, that's more ahead right there. Okay, let's go to some of these snare hits right here. Okay, that one's pretty on right there. Next. Pretty on. Oh, here we go. Ahead. Look at that. All right, let's listen to that little section. There was 3 hits, so we'll start on 1. Okay. I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I have practiced for consistency of time, consistency of sound, and just trying to make things feel good over years. And these are the kinds of things where I used to zoom in on Pro Tools sessions and look at it, and I would drive myself nuts because there was something that was out, and it's not landing perfectly, and it's not landing consistently, as in perfection. So, there's one. Here we go. There's a kick. That's a little behind right there. Okay. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. I think part of the thing that I have an appeal about is my playing. It breathes a little. It's not perfect. Again, there may be some things that I'm not right for because I have this in my playing. But I'm at peace with that, and I think that most people in the world, most drummers, would be the same. Technique is not always perfect. The way your posture, like all these things would have to be mechanical for you to play this all the time, and mechanical to me is boring. So work for consistency of tempo, work for consistency of sound. Work for consistency between where your kick and your snare land. Don't worry about being a kind of beat detective drummer. It hardly exists. And don't be a machine. We're human beings. Learn to play with machines. Learn to play well with machines. Don't become a machine, because the grid is not always right. That's my 2 cents. So let's talk about a few tracks in particular. I would say anything Charlie Watts has ever played, the Rolling Stones. I would say any Zeppelin track, Bonham. Anything Tony Williams ever did. Anything Jack DeJohnette has ever done. Clyde Stubblefield, the funky drummer. Great time. Incredible time. Not perfect on a grid. Omar Hakim, the David Bowie track, Blue Jean. Put a metronome on that. Check it out. Not perfect. Tom Sawyer, Neil Peart, Tom Sawyer, Rush. You know, put your metronome on it. Asia by Steve Gadd. This was a revelation to me when I was in college. I put a metronome on that, and I could not believe how far the time floats on that track. But it doesn't matter, because when the groove is happening, it's consistent. So let's talk about a modern track in particular that's kind of great to check out. There's a tune by John Mayer called Heartbreak Warfare, which Steve Jordan plays on. Pino Palladino is the bass player. This tune is basically at 97 BPM if you put a metronome on it. I would recommend trying this. Put it on, see how it floats. It's minimal. Steve Jordan, of course, has great time. No one would argue that he doesn't have great time, and obviously an incredible groove. But this, to me, is like the perfect example of something that feels incredible, and it moves a little bit. And I've done this test with some of my favorite tracks and some of my favorite drummers. I put it on. I know it's recorded with a click, and I've noticed, when a verse comes, maybe it floats. It comes off a little. The time doesn't. You would almost not even notice the time. But sometimes within the click, there's minor inconsistencies. You never know.